Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. Lots of stuff in the news today. Leak from apparently from the Department of Justice. I will say this, not confirmed from the Department of Justice, but a leak which certainly tries to paint the Department of Justice's probe of Donald Trump in the best possible light. Shows that there was an allegation that Donald Trump had as many as 300 classified documents in his possession at Mar-a-Lago, and that was the reason for the raid. It's an interesting story because, look, I worked with classified information, and nobody should be taking that home. However, especially if it's top secret and or compartmented, which is the allegation here, which is that at least a few of the documents were of that classification level. Those are the types of things that shouldn't be outside of SCIFs, let alone in somebody's basement or in somebody's garage or somebody's house. And it's legit that the federal government looks into that when it happens. However, the question is why the raid? Why did they go someplace else other than the place where they knew those documents had been stored because they'd been discussing it with Trump? And why the leaks? The Department of Justice is currently asking a federal magistrate not to unseal the affidavit underlying the warrant application because they say it's going to expose, sources and methods. Okay, fair enough. But then why are people leaking about what the Department of Justice found, what they were doing, whether that's coming from the Department of Justice itself, the National Archives, lawyers associated with that? Those leaks are clearly intended to spin this issue in favor of the Department of Justice. And it's certainly possible that the Trump side's leaking it in some sort of, masterful reverse dunk sort of thing. I'm not going to discount that entirely, but it's not exactly the way that the Trump team, even his legal team, has operated in the past. I don't give him credit for that kind of three-dimensional chess in this case. So it bears watching, and remember that the federal government has a legitimate interest in protecting those types of documents. So I don't want to discount that entirely, but there are ways to go about that, and there are consistent ways that they should be going about that. And in the case of Hillary Clinton, they didn't do any of this. They didn't even insist on getting the server back. They didn't issue a subpoena for it. They may have issued a subpoena for it. They didn't get a search warrant for it. They allowed Hillary Clinton to delete half of the emails that was on it before she gave the FBI access to it. And she doesn't have declassification authority to do that on anything that wasn't generated outside of the State Department. And so, and that server also, even after she wiped at least half those emails off the server, still had top secret and compartmented classified information, including NSA information that Hillary Clinton shouldn't have had in the first place. It came to her through Sid Blumenthal. And Hillary Clinton also was instructing her subordinates to remove classification markings in order to transmit classified information. It was fairly lower level stuff, confidential level stuff, but it's still classified. Confidential is a classification, and all of the rules of classification apply to it. So this is, there are a number of issues around this, and I'm keeping my powder dry on all of them, but I am very, very, very skeptical that this leak came from any place other than the Department of Justice and in any other effort other than to try to argue from behind the wall of secrecy that they're doing the right thing. If Department of Justice wants to have a political debate over that, open up the affidavit, let's take a look at the evidence, let's see what it was that they found. Without actually, talking about what the specific information is and what the steps were that they went through to get it, and then compare that to efforts in other areas to serve similar subpoenas and search warrants and that sort of thing. Right now, as you'll find on tomorrow's podcast, not today's, the FBI already has a problem with that in relation to a criminal investigation that took place in Beverly Hills, where they lied to a federal magistrate, straight up lied to a federal magistrate to get a search warrant that they intended to use to seize materials rather than inventory them, while telling the judge that they had no such intentions. And that was an apolitical case The FBI's got issues. The Department of Justice has issues. I don't trust any of them at this point in time. I don't trust Trump. I don't trust the Department of Justice. I don't trust the FBI to act in ways that are not politicized. And because they've been acting in politicized ways up until now. So I think it's important that we keep an eye on that, a very close eye on that. Other big news today, Twitter has problems. I don't know how many people will agree with me on this. I suspect pretty much everybody, but the problems go way deeper and way farther than we know. Their former security chief, who was a very well-known ethical hacker, was the term back in the late 80s, joined Twitter a couple of years ago to address some issues that their founder, Jack Dorsey, had discovered in terms of security issues. Now, these were not new security issues. The FTC, in fact, forced Twitter into an agreement in 2011 to address a lot of the security issues, the data privacy issues. And Twitter had insisted that they were complying with this. Well, what Peter Zatko says is that they weren't complying with it at all, and they were misleading the FTC into thinking that they were. There was foreign intelligence penetration into Twitter, which probably isn't terribly surprising. There were no real security controls. Data privacy issues were largely ignored. They were deliberately using consumer data in ways that they had pledged not to. And the bot issue. The bot issue is much worse than Twitter says it is in SEC filings, as well as in their legal fight with Elon Musk. So this is kind of a boon for Elon Musk, right? Because Twitter's suing him to enforce the terms of the original sales agreement, the buyout agreement, which I think was $54 a share. And right now, I checked this morning, it was $43. I'm not sure what it is at the moment here. It was $43 a share. My guess is it's probably gone down a little bit since this story broke late last night and into early this morning at CNN and the Washington Post. This is, I mean, it's a disaster. And I'm not sure why Parag Agrawal decided that he really wanted to fight this in court with all of this in the background. Zatko was let go apparently in January after he tried to raise these issues to the board, and he claims that Agrawal and other leadership were blocking him from doing so. They wouldn't let he tried to put this in writing to board members, and they wouldn't let him do that. And so he ended up pulling together a dossier with the supporting data and evidence and sent it off to the SEC, the FTC, the Department of Justice, and a Senate committee, which this week, they all received it this week or the last few days. Maybe, I think it was last week when they received it. The story broke last night into this morning. So that's an interesting story, and it will be interesting to see what Elon Musk has to say about this once all of this gets digested. He might end up being able to buy Twitter on the cheap because I think that Agrawal and the rest of the board might really want to get out from underneath this and let somebody come in there that's going to actually clean house. Tonight, primaries going on, right? New York and Florida. There's really not a lot interesting in the Florida race. Nikki Fried is running against Charlie Crist, and it looks like Charlie Crist should win that one. Actually, I thought Nikki Fried might end up on top there, but Charlie Crist will probably end up winning this. And he's trailing Ron DeSantis by 7 points or so in the RCP average. This is not going to be close in Florida. The CBS and The Hill, they're trying to say, well, can Florida Democrats take down DeSantis? The answer is no. But it will be interesting to watch it unfold over the next couple of months. They've been trying to take down DeSantis for 2 years, and they haven't dented him at all. And I think that Charlie Crist is going to have a heck of a time trying to convince people that he should be put back in the governor's mansion again. New York, All Pundits got a great post up about the New York primary. You got to go read that one. Gerald Nadler versus Carolyn Malone. Jim Garrity actually has a really good piece on that. You should read that over at National Review. These guys, they're supposed to be friends, and they are just going after each other viciously. I'm amazed that two politicians who have served for 30 years or more in Congress, one of them couldn't just take the hint and say, you know what, maybe it's time to retire, I'll let the other person have it. Their pensions are locked in. I'm not sure. I mean, this is sort of like the ambition and power just overrides everything here. Or just if you didn't want to do that, run in a different district. They had the opportunities. Both of them had the opportunities to change districts. They're living in the same redistricted district, but you don't have to live in a district in order to run for office, and you just have to live in the same state. Constitutionally, that's the only requirement. So they could one of them or both of them could have very easily gone to other districts. They chose not to do that. It's really ugly. So tonight's battle in New York, that's going to be something to watch. Read Ala Pundit's post on it. It's actually really excellent, and I know that you'll enjoy that. In the meantime, here's Andrew Malcolm. We talk about his latest contributions over at redstate.com. We talk about the media bias and the news of the day. And don't forget tomorrow, Eric Boehm from Reason is going to talk to us about that other FBI case. But that's tomorrow's podcast. Today, we've got the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of Red State with us. Stay tuned for more, and stay tuned at the end for my editorial for Salem Radio and Townhall commentary, as well as an explanation of what you can do to support this podcast and to support Hot Air. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. You've already seen him. He's already just popped up on the screen. The Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, Andrew Malcolm, at AH Malcolm on the Twitter. This is RedState.com, obviously. And one of our VIP and sometimes just plain old columnist authors at RedState.com. Andrew, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here. It's another week. Boy, these weeks are going fast.
Andrew, yeah, they're going fast, but sometimes not fast enough, right? Because, for the first time since you and I were in grade school and, in short pants, Anthony Fauci's not going to be working for the federal government.
I know. I'm devastated. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if I can I live in a world where Anthony Fauci is not issuing diktats to the rest of America as the highest paid federal employee, including, by the way, in comparison to the president of the United States. Fauci
is he really?
Yeah.
Is he really?
He makes $430,000 a year.
What?
Yeah. This came out either early this year or late last year. Somebody took a look at what he makes. He's been around so long, right? He's been around so long that he literally makes more than the president of the United States does on salary. And
he can afford to get a lot of vaccinations then.
Well, no wonder this guy didn't retire when he was, 65 years old or 70 years old. I think was he 78, 79, something like that. I think he's pushing 80. He's going to retire in December. Big announcement on Monday afternoon. Monday.
I wonder why. If there's some quiet disgruntlement behind the scenes about him.
He's talked about it, though. I don't think that's it.
He's talked about, if you're 80 years old, you have to talk about retiring. But
yeah. I mean, look, this podcast is going to include my my editorial on this point. But this guy has been a disaster for the last 2 years, and arguably going back into the 1980s. I mean, the AIDS activists didn't have a whole hell of a lot of love for Fauci, at least in the beginning of that either. Now, he kind of came along with them after a certain point, but they were very incensed about Fauci back then. And honestly, you can kind of get an idea of why. This guy's all over the place. He is basically, he's still pushing mandates that don't have any scientific foundation. This guy is an apparatchik whose first answer to everything apparently is, well, the government is going to tell you what to do.
Yeah. I think there's an awful lot of people. Well, Pete over transportation, he's into the government telling people what to do, but I think there's an awful lot of people who have had enough of that. And have had enough of the repercussions of government telling what to do because government was wrong.
Yeah. it's sort of the lack of humility. You know, I wrote this morning because it was announced that he was leaving. He's leaving in December, by the way. So we've still got 4 more months of Fauci, or 3 months of Fauci anyway.
Let's see, 4 more months. That's a 3 more months. That's a third of 400 some thousand. So he's still bundling it in. He'll probably get a pretty good pension.
That's what it's a quarter of a year, right? It's or you know, roughly speaking, right? So he's going to make about $110,000 over that period of time. Yeah, why not? I wouldn't mind making $110,000 over the next 3 months. You can alert our bosses.
And I don't know if he does the pension the way the military does, but it's like the average of the 3 highest years.
It is. It's a federal pension, right? So yeah, I mean, he's going to get a federal pension, and it's going to be based on his 3 or 5 highest years, something like that get averaged out, and that's the basis for the pension. And you know, he's salaried, so you don't have the overtime thing. You know, in California, the pension system is collapsing because it was wildly out of balance from the input that they were getting, in part because of that same rule, right? It wasn't your salary, it was your actual gross income. So if you worked a ton of overtime, you could really push your retirement up doing that. And a lot of people in that pension fund did that. And now they're paying the pension fund's going to pay the price because they can't match it. That's not Fauci's problem, obviously, but still.
Where do the pension funds come from?
Well, they're supposed to come from the employer, which means it's the taxpayers that fund it. And the taxpayers are going to be on the hook.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
It always comes back to that.
Oddly enough.
Don't worry, gas prices are down.
Yeah, you know, there's some new polls that came out too, you know, about where people are at. And the NBC News poll is interesting. The job approval number is about the same as it was for Biden. I think it went up. The disapproval went up by a single point. I mean, it's basically the same. But what I found interesting was that 68% of Americans, Andrew, think that we're in a recession, and 74% think we're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Huh. I don't know. Why would they think that with Joe Biden running the show?
Maybe it's because
he's not running the show. He's on vacation again. But when he is appearing to run the show.
Well, when he's appearing to run the show isn't running very well. And that's what the problem is. And of course, the media was very fast to report that the big story out of that poll was that Americans think that threats to democracy is going to be the biggest issue in the midterm elections.
Yeah.
You saw that?
Yeah. So they pounced on that.
Yeah, they pounced. Republicans didn't pounce on that. The media pounced on that. I mean, you take a look at the rest of the stuff in that poll, and you take a look at the Gallup poll. This is a Gallup survey I'd never heard of, Andrew. I mean, you know, we've got to talk a little bit about this one. The Life Evaluation Index. I've never heard of this. They've been doing it for about 16 years, right? But apparently, things are bad enough that we just hit a big new record on people who are suffering in the American economy, or just in America, basically in general. Hit a new record, 5.6%. That's up from 3.9% when Joe Biden first took office. It was kind of nice because we had a handy data point on that in February of 2021. You put all that together, and Andrew, don't you have to think that the midterm electoral environment is just uniquely, and I mean really uniquely bad? We haven't seen anything like this in decades.
Yeah, it is. It looks bad. I did a post of some weeks ago on this, and I said, "Well, Dad, but don't get too cocky if you're cheering against Joe Biden's approval, because these things can change. But historically, I don't think there's been any president's party, newly incumbent president's party, who did not lose seats in the midterm when he was underwater in spring approval ratings. So it's a pretty good indication. They are, Ron Klain saying they're going to make an argument that he's it's been a season of achievement with Joe as the president, and making an argument about spending a lot of money and so on. And they don't mention Afghanistan, inflation. Of course, they go with the unemployment rate being low because so many people have given up looking for work. So yeah, there'll be an argument about it. But if people bother to go to vote, which is the main decision to make, it looks patently bad for Democrats.
Right. And I mean, this is important. And I've talked about this on other podcasts. I'm not sure if you and I have discussed this, but I mean, this is very much a unique environment that we didn't see even in 2010, which, we still were having economic issues in 2010, but things had pretty much stabilized by that point in time. And even by the end of 2009, things had pretty much stabilized. And,
but Obama and Biden were showing strong signs of the arrogance that got them in trouble. They even lost Massachusetts that year.
That's true. You're right. They lost Massachusetts in a special election. That was Martha Coakley, right? That was the nominee for that Senate
and Scott
seat.
Brown.
And Scott Brown.
She wasn't great, but she wasn't a great candidate. But there was a sour taste, just like now, in people's mouths. The arrogance. Remember, we have to pass this to find out what's in it.
Yep.
Not a single Republican vote, and Americans can't complain because they're the ones who elected and gave. In those days, they gave complete control of Washington to the Democrats,
right?
And that usually swings back fairly quickly. They did the same thing in 2020, and hopefully it swings back now. We need to get at least one house because, despite the media's hopes for keeping the Senate, they need to stall this incredible spending orgasm that Joe Biden is having. I mean, it's just beyond belief. Over $6 trillion.
Yep.
Please, nobody tell them what comes after trillion.
We won't mention it here. Quadrillion.
Yeah.
But we won't say.
Quadrillion, yeah.
We won't say that again. Don't say the Q word, folks. Nobody says the Q word.
Well, you remember back in the 60s, Everett Dirksen, and it was a great, long-lived evergreen quote. Everett Dirksen, the Republican leader in the Senate, said, boy, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about big money.
Right.
And of course, $1 billion in those days was big money. Now, hey, send 30 more over.
It's whatever. It's just a couple $1 billion. It's chump change these days.
Yeah. Right. We can print it. But remember Jay Leno? I loved that ad. Years ago, Jay Leno was doing Doritos ads. And at the end, he always said, eat all you want. We'll make more.
That's right.
Spend all you want. We'll print more.
We'll make more. Eat all the dollars you want. We'll make more. So, I mean, this cycle, you can't rely on the 2010, 2012, 2014, 2018 paradigms. This is going to be a much different context. And I think that the media outlets, this is the other thing too. The media outlets, you and I like to talk media. The media outlets for the last 2 weeks, ever since Joe Manchin, Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, is already disgusted. Yet I persist.
No, go ahead.
Ever since the Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer made that deal, the only thing that you hear from the media is that Joe Biden's coming back. It's a big comeback for Joe Biden. Come back. It's kind of like.
Back.
Did you ever see that? Did you ever see the movie 8 Men Out about the Chicago Black Sox scandal?
Oh, I no, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Oh, it's a very good movie. And I highly recommend it. It's a very good movie. There's this one scene in the final game, because the Sox are just throwing this series right and left. They're playing terrible and all this. Lefty Williams gives up 9 runs in the first inning of the last game, and somewhere like around the 7th inning, this kid gets up in the bleachers and says, "Come back, come back." It's the most pathetic thing you've ever heard in your life. Come back, come back. And I mean, that's the media with Joe Biden. And the big comeback is, as the Washington Post reported today, the big comeback is nobody who's at any risk at all in this year's midterms wants Joe Biden campaigning for him. Did you see this thing, the Washington Post today?
Yeah.
He might not, according to the Washington Post, he might not be the top surrogate this year.
He might not. No, imagine that.
No.
Yeah.
Jake Tapper had Mark Kelly on. I love this clip. Jake Tapper had Mark Kelly on, and Tapper asked him, "You want Biden? You want Biden to be with you on the campaign trail?" And Mark Kelly's homina, 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 homina. And Jake Tapper says, "Well, that doesn't sound like an open invitation." But I mean, honestly, this media thing about the big comeback, even Democrats aren't buying this comeback kid stick.
No. It's not a new thing. They've been dodging him for a long time. Stacey Abrams and in California, I forget who it was, or no, it was Nevada. They didn't show up when he was there. It's I'm not sure how much power Trump does. Obviously, Trump has a lot of clout with his endorsement, but Joe Biden appearing for you somewhere, I don't, he's not Mr. Dynamo. So I don't know that everybody's going to go, well, if Joe's for him, I got to vote for him.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No, you don't think so, huh?
No, I don't, Edward.
Well, okay. So the comeback kid thing ain't working. It didn't work for Liz Cheney either, although nobody really. And
the gas price plummeting, that's not working. And inflation slowing, that's not working. It's not working, guys. I understand they're trying, but and they're trying like Martin Goebbels. If you tell the big lie up long enough, people will start to believe it. And I guess there are those drinking the Biden Kool-Aid who believe it, but
yeah,
no one who's thinking. No,
it's insane. It's insane to think that there's a comeback brewing when he's at 40-56 in a NBC News poll of all places. This is not a comeback. So anyway, let's move on to what you're writing about, because you've got one that's out from behind the paywall, and you've got one behind the paywall. I want to start with the paywall one because, of course, the big news last week was that Liz Cheney got trounced in her attempt to win the primary. She was facing a primary challenger in Wyoming, and Dwayne and I talked about this last week. You and I didn't get a chance to talk about it because the election took place after we were discussing this. But you're saying it wasn't just Donald Trump. Why people in Wyoming turned against her. And this was not close. This was, I think, the largest margin.
It's second largest in 60 years. Second largest in 60 years. Yeah.
For an incumbent congressperson.
For an incumbent congressman, shellacking. Yeah, it was 37, 38 points shellacking, and she had to know it was coming. Well, Trump's endorsement power, he's done pretty well, and he's gone after the 10 who voted for his impeachment, and I think besides or including resignations and so on, I think there's 8 gone now that he's got. So obviously he has great power, and Wyoming is not an exception. Now, Wyoming, actually, I found it interesting. Wyoming was the first state to give women the right to vote.
Right.
And that was 51 years before the nation did, 1869. And the reason, which I find fascinating, of course, is that the West was really quick on equality with women, The first woman elected to Congress was from Montana next door, was because on the frontier, everybody did everything. So it made no sense to, I mean, there were women driving oxen with plows, and everybody did everything. And so they reflected that in their, in their politics, which I think is great. So there were two women running. Now, Harriet Hageman, who Trump endorsed, was late to the Trump bandwagon and late to the election was stolen
Right.
mantra. She is a hard right conservative. Wasn't all that well known. She had a brief run for governor in, I think, 2018. She was not a politician. Her father was 20 years in the state legislature, but she was an environmental law politician and lawyer.
Right.
And her ads were, this is the point I make in the column Sunday, her ads were very slick. And there's not many people in Wyoming who think that it was her team that did it. So they think there's a lot of invisible help from Trump with the ads and with the clearing of the field. Now, it's typical in Wyoming for these kinds of primaries to have a crowded field. There was not one. There were no significant challengers to Liz Cheney besides Margaret Hageman.
Right.
So Trump could focus his energies, his PACs could focus their energies and their organizational efforts. And, she's not, Hageman is not a dynamo, but I don't think that's what mattered. Wyoming is the most Republican state in the country, registered Republicans. I think it's like 70% of the electorate is registered Republicans.
Wow.
And that electorate gave Trump his biggest margin of victory of any state. So they liked him. They still like him, obviously. And more importantly, they don't like Liz Cheney. The signs didn't say elect Hageman. The sign said dump Cheney. And this is another thing I mentioned in the column. It's quite strange. Her father, he didn't revel in retail politics like Bill Clinton did, but her father was much more attentive to Wyoming. He had 5 terms. Liz was going for her 4th. But you could find Dick Cheney at Nora's on Fish Creek in Jackson Hole, sitting in his favorite table in the back. People can come up and talk issues with him and so on. Liz Cheney was a total klutz about being in I keep saying Montana. That's where I work.
Right.
In Wyoming, she and the Wyoming political decorum. She tried to show her Wyoming residency about 10 years ago with a fish and game license, which Ed, you and I can buy. So that didn't work. So she bought a house or an apartment condo in Jackson Hole, which is where her father hangs out since he grew up in Casper, which is where Trump did his rally, of course.
Right.
In your face, Cheney. So she had the residency, and she, in 2013, I think, or 15, maybe it was, she openly challenged Mike Enzi, who was the incumbent Republican governor, Republican senator, and very popular. Well,
right.
It's a get along place, and that's kind of pushy. It's like honking your horn when somebody's a little slow at the green light in downtown Cheyenne. You just don't do that in rural Western culture. And you don't put on airs. You pay attention to the locals. At least you look like you're paying attention. When she announced this is so stupid. When she announced her Senate candidacy, she did it on a Facebook post that was geotagged McLean, Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's an open invitation to be labeled as a carpetbagger. And her whole campaign was based on Trump, 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 Trump. In her concession statement, she mentioned Wyoming one time. In his controversial ad in favor of his daughter, Dick Cheney didn't mention the state at all.
Yeah.
It was all Trump, 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 Trump. So Wyoming voters, as the Republicans, said, well, wait a minute, we want a Wyoming person representing Wyoming, not a Washington person pretending to be a Wyoming person. So she got shellacked, really shellacked. She had to know it was coming. And what you do when you get, what you don't usually do when you get shellacked like that is almost announce a presidential campaign. I mean, your home state won't take you by an historic margin, but I might run for president, which to the rest of the country is like, what? I mean, even if
it's a grift.
Like Liz Cheney, that's strange to do. But here's the reason, Ed, and you and I have talked about this. The media loves Republican mavericks. I call it the John McCain theorem, where if you're a Republican fighting against Republicans, you are a star.
Yep.
And you're going to get all kinds of attention. And sure enough, they didn't have the winner on the Sunday show from Wyoming. They had the loser, and talking about the future. Which she didn't in her campaigns. She didn't talk about what we need to do. She talked about, I'm going to do everything possible to ensure Donald Trump doesn't get anywhere near the Oval Office.
Right. Yeah.
And so she paid the price. So she must have wanted martyrdom. It's inexplicable. You want martyrdom, or you're so totally stupid politically about your home state that you.
Well, I kind of think of it as a grift. She wants to raise money.
Yeah,
she wants to raise money.
Yeah, for her. Yeah, and within hours of losing, she announced her PAC, which is Great Task. It's called, which is a phrase from a closing line of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So. Good luck with that. But that will enable her to go around the country and talk and maybe give money to some other candidates who are like her. I can't imagine there will be many, but who knows? I mean, that's what makes politics interesting. It's unpredictable, especially the modern years.
Yep. Very true. Very true. It is unpredictable. And what isn't unpredictable, of course, is that Andrew has great VIP columns. So you got to go over to redstate.com to see that. Just very quickly, we got a couple of minutes. Your Malcolm on the right was how the COVID thing brought back some useful stuff. I don't remember face masks ever being in vogue, Andrew. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, no. Well, actually, they were in the flu. There were.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
There were arrests in the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic because people weren't wearing masks. When I was a kid in Cleveland, urban Cleveland, in the 40s, if somebody had something in those days, of course, it could be smallpox, polio, or whatever. There were signs tacked to the door, so you didn't go in. I don't remember having any of those signs, but I was tickled because everybody's talking about, this wonderful modern thing. It's home delivery. Right? Get your groceries delivered. And I said, well, that was happening 70 years ago.
Right.
In fact, farmers, when I was growing up in Cleveland suburbs, farmers brought their trucks into the streets and they honked their horn and people came out and bought fresh vegetables that were just picked. They did meats, they delivered ice, they delivered coal. The mail came even on Sundays. In some cities, the mail was delivered twice a day. And everything was sold, even door to door. Fuller Brushman. We had, and something I mentioned was we had a a guy came to our door when I was a kid, selling tree seedlings. And my father thought it was hilarious, but he ended up buying one. So,
Yeah.
and it grew for a long time. So, yeah, my dad bought a used car. We lived in the country at that time. The dealership from Cleveland drove 25 miles out to deliver the car. And
that actually happened to me in the pandemic. That actually happened to me
I know,
in the
but
pandemic.
see, it's not new, Edward.
I guess not.
No. And telegrams, he didn't have texting, so telegrams came that way. It was for urgent messages, and nobody wanted telegrams in World War II days, because that's how you heard you lost someone in the family. So it was kind of fun to reminisce and to point out that all these people are excited about this new thing, home delivery. It ain't new.
It ain't new. No, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the bakers had local bakers would send trucks around, and you could buy bread and all sorts of different baked
and
goods.
Dairy farms.
Yeah, dairy farms. Dairy farms used to come around in trucks, and of course, milk deliveries were a thing everywhere.
Yeah, so, we had, and in fact, we had Darrow Dairy in rural Ohio, and they made a note so that the day before a birthday in the house, they delivered chocolate milk.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's actually very cool.
And doctors. I mean, you got medical care delivered to the house. You had home visits.
That's right.
That's if the kid was too sick, and I want to bring him in the office and get everybody else sick. So he came around with his little bag, sat next to the bed, and gave me the shot or whatever it was. It was. They had party lines. We had party lines in those days. And here's the thing, Ed. I can remember the phone number that we had when I was a kid, but I can't remember the password that I made over the weekend.
Yeah, memory works that way, unfortunately. But well, one last thing before we go, just really quickly. New opening at hotair.com for full-time contributor. We're looking to expand. Karen Townsend, by the way, is joining us full-time. So this is in addition to Karen. And so, we're posting up the job. If you haven't seen that at Hot Air and you're watching or listening to the podcast, you can find the posting for this. But yeah, we're hoping to do some new things, get a couple of fresh voices in here, and maybe do a few other new things after Labor Day is kind of what we're aiming for, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, if I wasn't taken, Ed, I would be back.
Well, there you go. I missed out on. It could have been the region of Hot Air, but he's the region. He's the region of. He's the region of
Totally blew it.
I did. I totally blew it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm into full time anymore, but I do have fun. I do have fun with you for all these years, and at Red State for now a year and a half.
Yeah, it's been great over there. Your stuff gets lots of traction, and it's a lot of fun. So you got to go to redstate.com and read everything that Andrew's doing. We're going to wrap things up, but not before we get a joke of the day. We're back to
the joke of the week. Yeah.
Joke of the week.
Well, these are old jokes, but it's a Conan replay. He said, yesterday a brawl broke out during Joe Biden's speech in China. Apparently someone was blocking the exit.
Yes. Now that's a darn good joke, and that's a good joke to go out on. Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, at @AHMalcolm. And, of course, region of redstate.com, which we've been saying, redstate.com. Andrew, thanks so much for being with us. We'll talk again next week.
You bet, Ed. Thanks you, and thanks, everybody. See you then.
Stay tuned for one last message from the Ed Morrissey Show coming up. This is Ed Morrissey of hotair.com for Townhall. Anthony Fauci has announced his departure from his role with the NIH and, most importantly, as Joe Biden's chief medical advisor. By December, Fauci will depart these positions after 38 years in government. It's welcome news. Fauci serves more as a cautionary tale on the pandemic embrace of scientific leaders dictating public policy. While hardly alone in erring repeatedly, Fauci made himself the public face of a scientific technocracy that pushed top-down diktats and devastating lockdowns and access restrictions, almost none of which measurably improved public health. As Biden's advisor, he pushed unconstitutional mandates with little or no scientific foundation, leading the pushback against those who dared to question these eventually discredited policies. The past 2 years have provided us an object lesson on the failure of expert rule and why public policy should come from elected officials accountable to citizens. Let us remember Fauci by ensuring we never produce his like again. I'm Ed Morrissey. Thank you for watching and listening to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube to get alerted as soon as new episodes get published. You can support the Ed Morrissey Show and Hot Air's VIP reporting by becoming a VIP member, too. Visit hotairvip.com and use the promo code SAVEAMERICA, all one word, for 40% off your membership. Choose VIP Gold and gain membership to access to all of the Townhall sites. Thanks again for watching and listening.